hello everyone, and thank you for joining session number 7, Connecting with Purpose, Proven Techniques for Strengthening Inclusivity, which is like just before you joined, I was talking to Brad and like, yes, this is so important and we're so excited to listen to you. So yeah, I would like to welcome Brad, Christie, Carrie O'Neill, and Gerry Hanley for joining us today. So let me share a few logistics before we start. So we are using automated Zoom captions during the live event, and we will edit the recording transcriptions before we share them with you to be more accurate. At the bottom of the Zoom window, you will see a closed caption button. If you would like to use this feature, select a closed caption, then choose Show Subtitle, View Full Transcript, or change the subtitle setting. And the other thing is we encourage questions in the chat. So please pose your questions using the chat function that we will moderate and discuss with our presenters. Toward the end of the hour, we'll share how we can continue this conversation online and share some additional resources to support your teaching. So now I'd like to hand the microphone over to our presenters, Brad, Carrie, and Gerry. Welcome.
Great, thank you. I'll go into share screen. Carrie, do you want to start? And I'll get the slides up.
Yeah. I just wanted to welcome you to our session today and to tell you that this is a issue that Brett and Gerry and I are passionate about, and we work together frequently and try to find ways to help bring more equity and inclusivity into teaching and learning. So today's session is going to focus a lot on the I'll introduce myself and have my co-presenters will quickly introduce ourselves. But today's session is going to focus a lot on the learning experience and how to make sure that you have an equitable and inclusive learning experience. So that's kind of our specialty and our angle. So I'm Carrie O'Donnell, and I guess the reason it's my specialty is that I lead a large team. I have a learning design agency that helps higher ed institutions and associations and workforce organizations and other organizations that live in the adult learning world reimagine the way learning happens. And our focus is very much on creating great learning for every learner in every context. And Brett, you go.
Great. Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, so Brett Christie, Director of Learning Design at O'Donnell Learn for the last 9 months or so. Before that, 25 years in higher education, almost entirely with the California State University system. First, going up through the faculty ranks at Sonoma State, one of the campuses, then as a faculty developer there a long time. And then the last part of it was at the CSU Office of the Chancellor. And there I worked to help with some system-wide implementation efforts related to universal design for learning, which I led at different levels for 15 years. That's sort of my passion point, and related to this topic is UDL. So that's where I kind of come in, but I've also worked on course redesign with technology efforts, how to infuse those with UDL and accessibility and inclusion, and then also working on quality assurance for online courses. And so we'll talk a little bit about our Purposeful Learning Framework that we have through O'Donnell Learn today. And I guess a personal touch point is I'm a first generation college student, and didn't really think about it much at the time, just had my own struggles and didn't know whether I belonged and whether I could do it. And now as I look back, really thinking about, okay, what can I do to help these and other students who might have their own experiences and struggles in coming into the course environment and seeing whether or not they feel like they belong and are welcomed and can succeed. So that's my take and goal. And also, I guess the other thing is how to take diversity, equity, and inclusion out of an office and out of the hands of just an officer for that effort and bring it into the classroom, into practice more so. And that's part of what we focus on. So Gerry?
Need to unmute.
Okay, thank you, Carrie and Brett. So my name is Gerry Hanley. I'm a recovering administrator from the California State University system. I was the Assistant Vice Chancellor for Academic Technology for 20 years and a faculty before that. And in that role, that's where I had the good fortune of working with Brett as a colleague for many, many years, and also with Carrie O'Donnell for many years, really trying to think about ways and build a community of people who would bring a powerful learning experience to all our students that we have in the Cal State system. Now, part of what I did as well as I'm the executive director of MERLOT and Skills Commons, which are free and open educational resource libraries. MERLOT has been around for 24 years. Skills Commons, we're coming up to 7. And I think what I'll be talking about a bit later is the importance of affordability of our educational resources and process that can really become a barrier for many of our students to ensure that you have equitable access to the materials that can really help develop the talents that we have in our students. So with that, I'll pass it back to, I think Carrie's next.
Cool. So we wanted to start with grounding this in something of an approach and philosophy that Brett and I have been working on together in the past year, which we call Purposeful Learning. And it's a framework for delivering learning that is grounded in empathy, that sets the stage for every learner to succeed, that creates courses or experiences that are social and humanized, that promote equity and inclusion, and that combine learning science with best practices and just good old-fashioned years of practice. And so what we've done is we've created a framework around purposeful learning, and it all kind of centers around what we call the 8 elements of effective learning. And so what happened is we work with hundreds, and we do hundreds of courses with hundreds of faculty in colleges across the country every year. My team we have a team of 150 design professionals that help higher ed institutions reimagine learning. And we created this framework initially internally to help them make sure that we are consistently helping every learner succeed. So if you look at the framework on the left-hand side, you'll see these are the elements of any course that you need to make sure you have to be successful and to be effective, right? And on the right-hand side are what we think of as the elements of the experience that ensure each learner is included and is humanized and feels like their voice is heard and that they're part of the experience. So we're gonna, things like everything we do is grounded in learner empathy and really thinking through what is the experience of the learner? What is the learner thinking, doing, seeing and feeling in your experience? And how can you support them? Gerry's going to talk a lot about accessible content and technology and how do you make sure that everything's accessible and that's affordable as well. So this is our framework, and we bring it up at the beginning of this because great learning requires some planning, some thinking, and some deliberate purposefulness around greater inclusivity. So today we're going to talk, we've incorporated and adapted some really great thinking that we found on Columbia University's Center for Teaching and Learning. And they have a really good inclusivity page and set of resources if anyone's looking. And there's a link down there at the bottom of our screen. And by the way, there's also a link on the previous screen to a video on purposeful learning if you want to see more. So you'll have access to our deck and you can peruse whatever is on here. So it has 5 principles, and what we're going to do is that we're going to kind of walk through each of these principles, Gerry and Brett and I, and just talk about some of what we're doing and how we think that it's important to support each principle. So first though, we're going to, and I'm not going to read the principles because we're going to go through them. but we're going to start with a Padlet. And one of the things that we do a lot to promote inclusivity is use low fidelity tools that allow everybody to participate in a way that is easy and simple. And this tool is called Padlet. And so what we'd like to do is we'd like to start, we're going to come back to it at the end. And what we'd like to do is start with getting a sense from you of what does connecting with a purpose mean to you? And also, so that's 1B on the left, and you can just hit that little plus button and you'll be able to add your comments. And then also, what is your specific goal for attending this session? We'd love to hear what you want to get out of this so that we can make sure we can address it. So Brett put the Padlet link into chat, and please copy it onto your browser and add your comments, and we'll be there. You don't see the plus sign.
Strange. I double checked to see that comments are allowed. Let me click it again.
Yeah, you might have to refresh the screen.
Yeah.
Thanks for.
It's still not showing up on the Padlet.
Interesting. Okay.
Let's move to chat.
Yeah, let's do chat. I don't see any other tool settings that I would be able to fix.
That's really weird. Now, by the way,
we can, sorry to interrupt, we can
Yes.
also use your session Padlet as well. It's ready to go. I can just put the link on the chat box too, if it's going to be convenient.
Want to
do
try
it.
this? Okay,
do
so I
that.
just put the link in the chat and it's on the screen. Let's have you focus on maybe the first one. What does connecting with purpose mean to you?
Okay, so then on the chat, on the our chat button, yeah, just what you can do is,
There it is.
okay, you can add comments right there.
Yeah, see the 1A, the first column, then you can add comments below that. Thank you.
Thanks. Where is that? Right. Cool. Love to hear it. Love to hear anything you guys have. So please. Oh, good.
There, I'm refreshing. We should be getting more, overcoming our technical difficulties. So there's your 1A.
Yeah, setting intention for what you want to accomplish. You know, it's interesting. We have a tool that we offer. It's an open education resource tool based on our Purposeful Learning Framework. It's called the Purposeful Learning Check, and it allows the instructor to actually go through a self-check and think about what it is that you want to work on and accomplish in your course. And there's a big piece of it. It's, you know, the 4 elements that we showed, that we give questions to you about how your objectives for how to accomplish these, and then you can reflect on what do you want to change. And I think it's a really important, self-reflection is really important. So Brett, I'm sure you have other comments, Brett.
Yeah, well, I'm seeing the establish a relationship. That's great. We have something wonderful to share with you in just a little bit. A tool we've developed that you're able to adapt or adopt. It's all yours if you want it. Clear and achievable goals. We are big on writing SMART outcomes. So we have sessions on that. Intentionality is huge in our work. That's something where I think teaching has suffered, particularly through the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
Meaningful interactions, to me, that can mean community. That can also mean humanizing, can also mean authentic learning. Oh, and I see authentic activities right below that one. Excellent. And efficiency, yeah, I'd like to hear more about that maybe as we go on. What's meant by efficiency? I think I have a sense.
One person commented that they are that Padlet may not be fully accessible. Brett?
Yeah, okay. Sorry. Let me move from that. Okay. Okay, so let's go maybe from the Padlet back to the slide, and we'll get ourselves on track here.
Okay, yeah. Sounds good.
again.
Let's go back. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, go ahead,
So
Carrie.
we're going to go quickly through each of the 5 elements, and please feel free to, again, put comments, questions in chat, and we'll be moderating that. So, it's so funny that the first comment up there was, what does connecting with the purpose mean to you? It's reflecting on what you're trying to accomplish, but also reflecting on one's belief to maximize self-awareness and commitment to inclusion. And this is a principle from Columbia University's team, but we actually extend that at O'Donnell Learn, and we actually think it's also reflect on not just your own beliefs, but also put yourself in the shoes of the learner is very much a part of this. To us, empathy and trying to think through empathy is a very big part of it. So this is a typical for online course. Does this look familiar to you guys? It's a Zoom class, right? A lot of us have seen these this year. Well, if you go to the next screen, you can look at this class in a different way, which is that every student, every learner in your class has something that they're bringing to the table that creates challenges and poses an opportunity for lack of inclusivity and lack of equity. And so as you think about your class and reflect, just kind of reflecting on how you can support different learners who have different, that bring different challenges into the classroom. So that's kind of one of the things we think a lot about. The next is we use this tool called an empathy map. And this is a really wonderful tool to think, and we do it in a group, oftentimes in a group of faculty, where you can really think about what it is your students are doing, seeing, thinking, saying, and hearing in the class. What are their emotional needs? What are their social needs, their intellectual needs, and their physical needs when they're in your classroom? So starting with learner empathy, I think is the best way to really reflect and to really put yourself in the shoes of the learner. And then, of course, there's a lot of self-work. And I think a lot of us have spent this year really studying deeply and thinking deeply about what are your implicit biases, what are your perspectives, what are you, for me, I think of my privilege a lot, and how do I make sure to think about other people, and not from the point of view of being white and the privilege of that offers. So some of the things, I'm taking this a little personally, but this is some of the things of what I do to reflect on and question about my beliefs. And one is I have family conversations, and right on the left up there, that's my son, Steven, who teaches special education students. And he brings a lot of provocative conversation to the table. Listen to podcasts, you're right. You look at websites all the time and see what other people are doing and thinking. You get out there into the garden or take a walk and you read. And so that's what I do to reflect on my beliefs as a first step. On to you, Brett.
Great, thanks, Carrie. And on the empathy mapping, I mean, that's one of the very first things we often do with faculty, just really flip things into the student perspective and get them into student shoes. And then we keep going from there.
Yeah.
So the second principle, establishing and supporting a climate that fosters belonging for all students. So we'll give you a couple examples of what we do, but we'd also like to keep hearing from you in the chat. This has been very active, which is great as far as the comments and contributions you have there. So the role of instructor being so critical, the cloud you're seeing on the right there, and burnout and anxiety, and this is students, but also faculty, also staff, but just everybody in general with all that we've been through, particularly in the last year, and still uncertainty to come. So how, and food insecurity and housing insecurity. So how can we think about those issues and how they impact students, and then be mindful of that as we are going through the teaching and learning process? So one of the things we do is we really work to have a good course welcome message. And often that's a course welcome video, and we want that to be humanizing. We want there to be some humility A good tone of the syllabus and its language. I looked at research just in the last week, wonderful research showing that the tone of your syllabus does matter. Students will be significantly more likely to ask for help based on the tone of your syllabus. And that's particularly critical for students who might be on the margins for different reasons. And if they're marginalized and the syllabus has an uninviting tone and makes it seem like only certain students are there to succeed and survive, then that's not going to serve all students best. We'll talk about learner connectedness and a tool for that specifically. And then being present as an instructor, being available, being present, it doesn't mean being on demand all the time. You can still set parameters, but being present in many different ways, synchronously, asynchronously, communication, feedback. Some people do not just welcome videos, but they'll do bumper videos coming in and out of modules. They'll have quick videos. Michael Wesch is the pro at doing that for sure. Establishing course as community and having that conversation with your students, that this is a community of learners, that you all have ownership and stake in this and a lot of control in the direction of where we go and the conversations that we have, and you all have something significant to contribute, and then actively being inclusive about that. So this is just an example for a course welcome. You can do a recorded video and post that in YouTube video, embed it in your LMS. One of the techniques we use is Flipgrid, which is a great free tool. And with Flipgrid as an instructor, you can record a welcome video and then maybe have all the students do a quick introductory video. You can also do this on other topics. So with Flipgrid, easy to use on different devices right through your browser. They tend to be 90 seconds or less, and students take to these pretty quickly. And then you start bringing in faces and stories and weaving community together by doing that early on. So we've done that with faculty learning communities as well, just to be able to model that. And then how do you humanize your syllabus? I know Michelle Bukansky-Brock is part of the program this week, and that's wonderful. She's been doing this for so long. And I've been using examples of that related to UDL probably for about 10 years now as well, and following her work. This is just one of many examples that we have, but just looking at a traditional syllabus and how dated that can feel and how static and impersonal, and sometimes the language is third person. It's almost punitive in the language and threatening at times, particularly in regard to evaluation and rules. Well, instead, this is an actual story of a marketing syllabus that then got turned into an infographic. And so she simply took the elements and pasted them into a template. Now, I always tell instructors, and you can see what happened here, and with her story, students started really sitting up and taking notice. They wanted to read it. People wanted to come to this course because right away they were seeing something different happening. It was speaking to them. They could see that social media was going to be an element, and they started communicating even before the course, that community started happening. I always, yeah, see the comment. I knew that was coming, Diane. I always tell instructors, keep that Word version, always update the Word version, update the infographic by pasting over. So you've always got the Word version for accessibility or other preferences, like read aloud. It can be read aloud that way, or you can have this infographic version. So keep them both. Definitely cover that accessibility. So many other examples that I've seen people use that are wonderful as far as infographics or sort of a Ken Burns newsletter type feel. So I would encourage people to explore that. And then another one that we're really excited about is this learner connectedness survey. And looking at some other models that were out there and the research on doing this, we put together this example, and I'll put the link into the chat here. And that should get you to having your own copy, because we don't want you using our copy and us having the data. We want you to be able to have your own Google Form copy so you can do any adapting of the language, let's say, or changing any of the elements in there as you desire. Then you own it, you can use it, and you own the data. But this is designed for students to complete, and it's submitted to you, and only you see the responses. You may in a subsequent course session just give them sort of an overview response. This is what I learned about you all as a group. But these are individual responses, and they're sharing things just about, you know, their name and identity, which is a great gateway to who they are. And then they're going into some of their situational factors, some of their goals. What's their life like as far as work, commute, bandwidth, caretaking, all those complex factors that are involved in students' lives and checking on those. So hopefully that link should have worked and the QR code should have worked for you. And feel free to adopt or adapt that. That's been a great tool. Okay. And then let's see, let's go ahead and talk about setting those clear expectations and then providing multiple means for achieving them. So one of the things I mentioned earlier was you want to have those smart learning outcomes. And so we really focus on analyzing learning outcomes from the get-go. But I'm going to talk more about the principles of UDL. This is going to be very, very brief and talking about the recognition networks, the affective networks, and the strategic networks. For many faculty, just thinking across those three networks and how students might be experiencing things is new, particularly the affective network. So when we talk about the recognition network, we're really talking about how you present content in different ways. You want to have multiple ways of presenting information for students because it's going to be better for different students in different formats. You also want to think about what you're representing and how. Are you representing diverse examples? Are you showing a diversity of individuals in different types of cases that you're displaying or presenting, so that students will see themselves in that field, in that discipline, or in that field? They'll see representation. The affective network, that's really what connects to students. So how can you stimulate their individual interests and motivate them for learning? This is something that does take some time to think about and some effort, but it's about giving them agency. It's about getting into active learning and authentic learning experiences. And I think, again, that's an undertapped area. And then last is the strategic network, which is how do you give students multiple ways to demonstrate what they've learned, what they know, or what they're capable of doing. If you have that one type of high-stake assessment, that's not going to be effective for some students. If you can instead do more formative assessments, more frequent assessments with more feedback opportunities, and also vary the types of assessments, that's going to be better for students. Also, if you have one large project or paper in mind, can you make it so instead of a paper or research paper, can they develop a different product that has the same process, but maybe a slightly different outcome or product? So there are different ways where we've been able to map multiple pathways to the same outcomes for students, to give them choice and to be able to excel in ways that they're comfortable. Now, I know that with certain learning outcomes, you have to have them demonstrate it one way. That's fine. You certainly have a reason for doing it, but if there's flexibility available, be flexible when you can, but hold them to the same standards. So that's just a little bit on how we use UDL. We have a lot of practical ways where we go through the three principles in the framework of UDL. We have a whole website called udluniverse.com that has pages and pages of examples. Okay, so representation, engagement, and expression, the what, why, and how of learning. And then to make more active learning take place, whether it be online, synchronous, asynchronous, or even distanced in-person classrooms, or even now high flex classrooms, we've got about 50 of these different active learning techniques that can be used. And so we've developed a handout for that. And what we'll have to do is take the link, and actually we didn't post it here, my apologies, is we'll post that into the session Padlet and make that available. So some of these are beginner type techniques to think, pair, and share, all the way on up to doing something like a fishbowl type activity, which would be more complex. Okay, and then I'm going to turn it over to Gerry to talk a little bit about more of the removing barriers.
Thank you, Brett and Carrie, and again, thank you everyone for joining us here. I think the fourth principle about embracing practices and content that recognize diversity and acknowledge barriers, and I'll begin with speaking from the California State University. If you can, there you go. Is that and if you remember that the Zoom picture that Carrie and Brett showed early on, and there were all these invisible aspects of people about, I'm hungry, I'm homeless, I can't afford gas to go visit my parents, I'm having trouble paying rent. And when you have data actually about the economic state of your students, it really can have an impact on how you begin to make choices on how that designing that educational experience. And I'll just say in the California State University system, where we have close to 500,000 students, 41% of the students said they were food insecure. They're going hungry. And this was before COVID. 11% said they're homeless part of the year. And when you begin to kind of begin from an empathy perspective on what are the needs, what are the feelings, what are the goals that your students have, then you can really begin to shift and begin to become more creative in how you can deliver you can design your education for your students. And, you know, I've various sayings. One of them is, your job is to teach people, not information. And if you're going to teach people, you have to spend that time to understand who they are. So, you know, when Brett showed the learner connectedness survey, when you reach out and ask your students how they're doing, who they are, what their purposes are, you begin to validate their identity. You begin to get a better understanding of their goals and their purposes. And importantly, you get a chance to understand that they can be an active part of their learning process in the design of the learning itself. And so this is opening up your learning design strategy. So when you get to the next slide here, so I'm an advocate for open educational services in various ways and open educational resources. And so when you begin to look at how economically distressed our students are, and again, all the data that I was providing in the CSU, about half of our students are Pell eligible. We have campuses where 85% of our students are on financial aid. So looking at using open educational resources as tools that your students can have immediate access on the first day of class can really support them learning, not them worrying about how am I going to be successful in the class, because you give them those resources from the get-go. And we've been working with O'Donnell Learn for many years, and how we can bring those free educational resources. MERLOT has more academic resources. Skills Commons is workforce development. It's all the open educational resources that were produced by a $1.9 billion program by the US Department of Labor, and we've aggregated all into a library for you to download, revise, remix, reuse, retain, and redistribute, right? And what's important about it is also when things have what's called a Creative Commons license, it's permission for you to change. This is when you can open up your teaching to your students. So in the next slide, what I want to emphasize here is when you are teaching people and not information, when you're having your students be your partners in the process, and when you begin by shifting the locus of control to your students, not that I as one faculty member has to try to think about what's the right context for everyone, but if you give the students voice in helping them shape the curriculum, and it could be from simple things to say, whether it's teaching biology or social science or economics, to have them go out and search for educational context, for content that is meaningful for them, and to have them begin to create their own bookshelves and begin to share those resources with other students and yourself. And there are tools for do that. For example, MERLOT can help students. It's free and easy for your students to use and for you to use. So again, opening up the pedagogy so you do not exclude your students from the design of their learning. And so that's another important aspect. And the other, and tying this back to a point that Brett was just making around UDL and the strategic network, the affective network, and the recognition network. If all we're doing is teaching information, it's what's my job in the classroom, then you're really not engaging how students feel, because you know what? You don't care. You're just thinking about yourself. But when you're teaching people and you're giving them a locus of control and you're giving them a problem of how do I want to take this concept in anthropology and relate it to my cultural existence right now, and how do I create an assignment that I can demonstrate my understanding? All right, that's what opening pedagogy is. And yes, you might feel it's really risky from the way we've normally done things, but it is, I'll say, amazingly securing for your students by validating that they are important in the learning process. So open educational resources, provide an affordable access to those materials immediately. There's also open educational practices where faculty are sharing with e-portfolios how they do various innovative things. And then open pedagogy is really about opening your students' ability to engage in that learning. And O'Donnell, you'll see a number of their materials that they have are going to be and are open educational resources for you to use immediately for free. So you can invite your students to say, you can have a lifelong learning library for free. There's MERLOT, go again and have some fun, and then you can have them bring it into your teaching. So with that, I think I pass it back to you, Brett or Carrie.
Back to me, Gerry. Thank you.
Oh, back to you.
Brett, I want to make one comment. I'm just going to throw we have, we are really committed to open pedagogy, and we're sharing some of it here today. But I'm going to put on the link a site that we just put a bunch of our tools and more information on the Purposeful Learning Framework and how you can do the Purposeful Learning check. So I'm going to put that in chat right now, and you can go and register and have access to that.
Great.
Thanks, Carrie. And yeah, just noting time check, we're at 5 minutes left. So I'm going to try and get us through this last section here.
You know what, Brett? We can listen to you forever. Like, I'm supposed to give you like time notice, but I was like, wow, this is amazing. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I don't know if that's universal across the group though.
That's amazing. So I'm checking the chat box. Please, everyone, if you have any questions, you can put your questions on the chat box. We will be happy to answer it now. And I see some questions are coming.
Great. And one more section really quick. Unfortunately, accessibility in 3 minutes, that's not fair. And we have actually developed this session out into a 90-minute workshop that we're looking forward to offering in venues coming up in the future. So yeah, it is short for covering all of this, but we've got an idea to do that in the future. How many of you have seen this or a baseball related image like this over the last 10 years? It's been floated around all the UDL communities and things like that. So I thought this was a wonderful image, but we thought, well, in the year of going online, let's come up with something that kind of speaks to the current scenario a little bit more. So this is what we came up with. The first is rapid remote online instruction, when people had 2 days to a week to convert everything to online. And often what you had was instructors just saying, okay, I'm going to just lecture for 50 minutes, or I'm going to record a lecture. If it was a live lecture, students had to be there, otherwise they missed it, they were left out. Or if it was a recorded lecture, it was often a talking head, maybe there was PowerPoint. We had some people then shifting to, okay, I'm starting to feel comfortable using Zoom. I can have the students live as participants, but as you can see in the middle option, there's an instructor who has a heavy text-based slide. And then in the chat from the student comments, you get a sense that there's nothing else going on. There are no additional resources or links being provided, no discussion taking place, no Q&A being considered. So it's very limited, still one-way delivery to the last example where hopefully there's a more mature way of using Zoom to where, okay, now it's being recorded. So yes, it happens during that hour, but they can access it later if they need to follow up on anything. And yes, it's being captioned. So they have that for accessibility, for usability, and also searchability later on if they want to. And then if you were able to read the chat, you can see that the professor is sharing links, students are sharing comments. Hey, I found this a great related resource. And so there's more engagement happening all at once, and people are kind of paying attention and being involved in the learning process and getting more from that. So that's kind of how we've taken the same concept to hopefully having a more inclusive and mature model of online course delivery there. And of course, we would encourage them to use active learning techniques, breakouts, Padlets, whatever it may be, on top of that whenever possible. So that's just kind of our advancement of that equality versus equity versus inclusion. And then as far as what accessibility means, we talk about the common issues. We have a top 10 tips thing that we give to instructors because much more than that can be overwhelming. They shouldn't have to be accessibility experts, but they should know the main barriers that get in students' ways. So we focus on the common things, and then we'll focus on other tools as it comes up. And we try and point them to the most accessible online tools anytime we can. And they learn common functions of the main assistive technologies, screen readers being an example. So that's what we do to create mindfulness in terms of accessibility and usability. And then they might even just plug to their students that, hey, there's this great thing called File Transformer. You as students can take any of my files, put them into this transformer. If you want an audio output version of that, here you go. If you need anything down to Beeline Reader, if you're familiar with that, translation, electronic braille, boom, it'll put out those different formats for you. So that's something that Blackboard Ally has created or made available during COVID, is this great file transformer. Okay, so let's look at discussion with what little time we have left here. Padlet, we weren't able to let you contribute. We could go back. Let's just use the chat since we're at 44 after. And let's do a check-in. Carrie and Gerry, are you seeing anything else? The slides will go up through the conference website along with the session Padlet. You'll have access to the links in our slides, and we can put additional links into the Padlet. And let's see, what else? Any other questions?
We will also share the recording of this session. So hopefully you will have all these things very soon. And thank you so much for sharing slides in the chat box. I'm just bookmarking it too. That's
perfect.
Great.
Well, hopefully it was useful, the purposeful learning framework, that context, and then thinking specifically about inclusivity within that, and those 5 stages and 5 steps and some of the resources. We have many more, and hopefully at another time we'll be able to go deeper into more of a hands-on session with additional resources.
I don't see any other questions in the chat box, but maybe some people are still typing. I don't know, but I feel like I just see wonderful thank yous and like wonderful appreciation in the chat box. It was so great. And thank you so much. Connectedness, inclusivity, sense of belonging. Sometimes making little changes in your course design or communication style might make a tremendous impact on student success and retention. And sometimes you forget about this. So this was a great reminder, and wonderful techniques and tools and resources you shared today. Thank you so much. And I'm going to put the Padlet link once more in the chat box. Please ask questions later on too. Hopefully our presenters will check this Padlet later on as well.
Yes.
Please leave feedback in this Padlet too. So we're going to provide all the recordings and slides in our websites and also through email. So we're going to have a quick break, not quick, actually long break, and we're going to come back at 4 again for 2 other sessions. So please check the program and hope to see you again at 4 p.m. Thank you so much again. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye. Excellent.